And it's recording now. I think we could start. 14 seconds.
Yep.
Oh, going live in 10, 9, 8, 7. I love the countdown. Hi, everyone. Do you see and hear us? There's a little chat window on the right-hand side. Can you just be like, hey, we're here, we see you, or we don't see you? Hi. Okay, hi, Chris. Dave. Okay, cool. So people see us. That's good. Thanks all for joining us. I don't know what time it is
That's
for
good.
everyone. I know some people it's like evening, some people it's really, really early. We're trying to find a good timing that works for people everywhere because it's really hard to schedule a time zone that works across the world. So thanks all for joining us. I'm just going to hand it right over to Stefan. We could start. Hi, Luann. Hi, everyone. Okay, so Stefan, you're welcome to go ahead and take it away. Oh, well, but really quick beforehand.
Yeah.
If you guys have questions and you want us to interrupt, if you would like to interrupt Stefan during his presentation, just put it right in the chat window. If you want a question that you want to save for the Q&A at the end, there's a little Q&A tab on the chat window. You could just click it. You could type the question in there, and then we'll save it to the end. If you ask any questions in the chat, I'll just interrupt Stefan while he's presenting and just interrupt him. All right, go ahead. Take it away.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Karen, for the introduction. Since mine's rather bad, I'll switch to the camera right now and more bandwidth for the imports. Let me just do that right now. Okay. And I'm gonna share my screen. So where is that? Yeah, you should see now my screen. First of all, thank you all for joining on this session. So this is, I think, the first session we record for you ninja guys, which should be a kind of direct line to us and provide you some first-hand information which others don't get in that detail at that point of time. So should be a kind of goodie for you. What I want to cover today is I want to talk about API changes in Neo4j 4.0, mostly focused at the Java developer, and also some update on the APOC library. For those who don't know me, my name is Stefan. I worked for Neo4j for, I think, more than 8 years now. You see in the slide deck my email address and Twitter handle if you have some questions later on. And as Karen said, if you have a kind of immediate question directly on some topic during the presentation or the demo, just fire it to the chat. If it's something we should cover afterwards, it's more for the Q&A. And I consider this talk being more a conversation style and not that much like a lecture. So please interact. Okay. Yeah, so the good news of APOC 4.0 is almost there. So back in July, August, when some changes in the main product reached a certain state, I started to port APOC to adopt for Neo4j 4.0. The main goal was we wanted to maintain existing functionality, and APOC has a test suite, I think, of more than 1,200 to 1,300 unit tests, and the goal was to make them all green on 4.0, which I finally succeeded in December then, where we pushed out a 4.0 release candidate 1. And APOC 4.0 GA will be released together with Neo4j 4.0, which could happen the next period of time. So I'm not allowed to disclose the exact date, but I would take a close, I would follow the Neo4j channels rather close this week, just as a hint. So the bad news on APOC 4.4.0 is I didn't receive much feedback on the release candidate so far, which either means no one was actually trying it or there were no complaints. I'm going to hope for the latter, but we'll see how it works out. I have a good feeling. So a few things that have changed in APOC 4.4.0. I think the main thing that you as an APOC user are faced with is configuration. So until now, the Neo4j configuration and the APOC configuration were both residing in the Neo4j conf file. This has changed. Reason for that change is that Neo4j itself does way more verbose checking on the conf file settings. So only declared config settings are allowed in the Neo4j conf file anymore. And in APOC, we have some settings that we don't know in advance. Consider, for example, the JDBC data source settings. You can just add new data sources as you go. So we don't really know what kind of settings keys you want to use. And that level of dynamic is not supported by the Neo4j conf mechanism. So therefore, I'll integrate it, the Apache Commons configuration library, which allows a very dynamic way of configuring things. So we can now place the APOC configuration in different locations, and the precedence of these settings is as follows. So the highest priority get the environment settings. So if you set an environment variable, that's the highest level, then we can set it by system properties, or we can put stuff in a file called apoc.conf, which also resides in the conf folder side by side with the Neo4j conf file. And if we haven't declared anything in these three, then some defaults hook in. The good thing about having environment variables is, we will see this later on, you can use them very easily with Docker deployments, where the Docker call just has another environment settings and it's automatically popping up as an APOC configuration setting. The configuration settings that are allowed and how the configuration things work is in the documentation. You see this here, the first link. So the settings itself have not changed much, it's just the location that is different now. You probably heard about some Neo4j 4.0, the main feature is multi-database. So in version 3 point something, we only had one database. So there was no statement like you know from MySQL or any other database where you can create a new database in one instance. This has changed now. So in the community edition, it's restricted to 2 databases, which are predefined. It's the default database Neo4j, where we store all your nodes and relationships. So this is the standard database. And on the side, there is always a system database, which gets a kind of special treatment. I'll come to that later on. In the enterprise edition of Neo4j, you can have an arbitrary number of databases in the same instance. So therefore, since we have now multi-database, APOC should also get some features to deal with that. And the first 2 procedures have been added, which spit out the contents of the system database. It's called APOC systemdb graph. And it returns the contents of the system database. It's important to know that you cannot fire arbitrary cipher commands against the system database. There were some design decisions taken that this should not be allowed. But with that thing, you can get the low-level contents of the system database. And there's another one, it's APOC systemdb execute. There you can fire some DDL commands on the system database. This is mostly show, there's some new syntax for granting permissions and stuff like that. So this allows you to communicate with the system database from within APOC, basically. What I have already planned, which will not make it in the first 4.0 release, is the way to create nodes in the system database by APOC system create node or APOC system create relationship. And what I also am planning for is some feature to copy contents between databases, either by fully copy or by partial copy. So there I will mimic the APOC export cipher procedures in a way that you can specify as a target a different database, and then you can have easily a partial or a full copy of some existing database on the same instance. One thing that is not that important to you as an APOC user, but more if you're an author and you write your own custom procedures, you're aware that there is the add context annotation to be used to get access to some components within Neo4j. And there's two additional context variables that are available. One is the context for the APOC config. This is just a class that holds the APOC configuration. And another one is for the database management service. So that's the overall access point to all the databases within your instance. So there you can get a reference to a system database, or if you're an enterprise edition, to any other database. That's quite useful. So therefore, I decided to just add that. So in your custom code, you just put that add context, and then you have the reference there. A few things have also been removed in APOC 4.4.0. So we got rid of all full text, free text procedures for historic reasons. So if you remember in the old days, version 3.0, 3.1, and so on, Neo4j hasn't had a good story on full text indexing. This has changed with 3.3 or 3.4, where full text indexing became a first-class citizen in Neo4j directly, and therefore the APOC full text, free text procedures were confusing users because some didn't know what they should use now. And by removing these, we clearly point them to the stock Neo4j functionality. I also removed some of the global graph algo func procedures. Historically, they were in APOC, but as this part of APOC grew a lot, the graph algos have been outsourced into a separate library, the graph algo library, which is now partly maintained directly with the product team at Neo4j. They built a kind of graph data science library out of that, and therefore I could retire all that functionality within APOC. So we don't lose functionality, it's has just been removed, or some applications have been removed. And also some other procedures have been removed because they don't make any sense any longer, like APOC index, ordered range. So the standard indexes can now do ordering by themselves, so we don't need these procedures anymore. Some goodie, which is not directly related to APOC, but worth mentioning here, is the recent versions of the Neo4j Docker image do allow for automatically downloading libraries like APOC, the algo library, or the GraphQL library. If you add here, see on the 6th line, this -e Neo4j Labs plugins, you can provide an array which mentions all the libraries that you want. And what happens on startup is that when the Docker container is started, it touches the versions JSON file to understand which JSON version, which version for APOC or the other libraries do I need for the given version of Neo4j, and then download that jar file automatically. So you don't have to supply APOC externally. You can just have a smooth way to start a Docker container having APOC on board. I'll show this live in, once I get through the slides. What's next? So on Neo4j API changes, yeah. So the version 4.0 indicates it's a major release. So therefore, we have a few breaking changes. There is a detailed migration guide available. I've pasted the link in here. So that's the kind of ultimate source of truth for that. I will highlight a few of them and provide some more context. So this is what I'm doing now is not a full walkthrough through the surface changes. It's more highlighting a few things that were important to me while upgrading APOC to the recent version. So I think the most important change is that we deal with transaction differently now in 4.0. In all the versions, I think even back to 0 point something versions around about 10 years ago, we had the concept of transactions being bound to a Java thread. So whenever you're in a different thread and you call begin TX, you get a different transaction. What we didn't support is proper nested transactions, and they were basically so-called in marketing terms flat nested transactions, but de facto it was just a placebo transaction, and those have gone away. So whenever you call db.begintx, you get a fresh new transaction. That's probably the most important change in my opinion. As part of that we don't bind the transaction to a thread any longer. We have all these top level operations like creating a node or calling execute or so on. These functions have now been moved to the transaction interface. So instead of db create node, you call now tx create node. The typical transaction blocks also look slightly different. So the try with resources stays the same. You open a transaction, and then you do your stuff with the transaction, and then you call transaction.commit. Back in new versions 3 point something, it was tx success. The reason for that is tx commit really now performs the commit, and it does no longer just mark that transaction for success. This was kind of scary to me from the very first days. If you work in other databases, this concept of success and fail and finishing up the transaction when leaving is kind of weird. So here we have now explicit commit and a rollback, which exactly behave as they should. A side note, if you try to do something in the transaction after the commit, you will get an error, an exception being thrown. The same way you have the commit, you also have the rollback. That be also like expected. What else do we have? Yeah, there those of you who dealt with Neo4j under the hoods as well, you probably know that there were graph properties. Graph properties is like a set of properties which you know from nodes and relationships, but graph properties do exist on a global level. So you can think about that being a kind of transactional safe, persistent hash map being existing on a global level. These were called graph properties. Graph properties were never been a public feature. It always was something hidden in the deep levels of our APIs. They exist for a very long time, and these graph properties have now been removed. That caused some headache on my end because we use the graph properties in APOC to store trigger information, UUID handler, or if you declare custom cipher procedures, they also got stored in this graph properties area. So that has gone away, and the proper way to store this information is I just write that to the system database. I'll show that later on. Yeah, to system database. And the system database, some word of warnings here. As said, you cannot access it with Cipher. What Neo4j currently stores security information there. So as you will learn shortly, Neo4j 4.0 has much more fine-grained security model, and the information how you configure that security model is stored in the system database. And you should be aware that the layout of that system database is subject to change and not part of the public API. So we take the kind of freedom to change that layout whenever we want. So therefore, you should always rely on the documented DDL commands to deal with security there. Eventually, in some future version, the whole Neo4j configuration might also be stored in that system database. And as mentioned, the for APOC, I need to store some things with the database, and I put that into the system database. These were the free things like UUID handlers, custom cipher procedures, and trigger information. Yeah, now let's switch to some live demo. Yeah, give me a second. So first, I want to show you that that Docker thing.
Have any questions?
So this is my start script. So you see here my Neo4j Labs plugins, APOC. And what I forgot to mention during the talk itself is you don't have to set this specific setting any longer. That is automatically added when you have Neo4j Lab plugins being loaded. So with that, I can, there's something is hiding here. Just move that here. Yeah, that's better. So we can just run the shell script now. And boring enough, it just will start Neo4j 4.0. And you see here it's installing now the APOC plugin. It downloads it from GitHub. That's going to take you a few seconds if you have a weak internet connection like I do. If you're faster, it should be just one shot. A few seconds to go. Yeah, here we go. And Neo4j is starting up. And let's see, it's not yet completely there. Yeah, now we should be available. So we can go localhost 7474. Nothing special here. What I wanted to show you is this system database contents. So we can do APOC systemdb graph, and you get here rendered the contents of the system database directly as a graph. And you see here one thing. This is from a previous test where I created, you see that node here, there's an APOC trigger node here. Let's just give it a different color. APOC trigger. Yeah, let's make that, give it a blue. So so for each trigger, what I previously did, well, we can just create another trigger here. That's just a copy paste from the APOC manual. So I created a trigger called set all connected nodes 2. We do that. New trigger has been added, and if we spit out the graph now, you see here we have 2 APOC trigger nodes here and there. And if you get over them, you see here, this is the set all connected nodes 2, and you see all the configuration of that trigger being stored in that node. So each trigger produces a new node in the system database, and as a naming convention, I prefix them, all the labels that I'm using there, I prefix them with APOC to avoid naming collisions. And the same applies for custom procedures. And yeah, that's just a kind of first view on the system database. And you see here there is a kind of the permission, how this permission system is modeled. So there is some permission, write, traverse, read, editor, and so on that apply then to some databases. And as I said, this layout is subject to change in future releases, so don't rely on that. It's probably interesting to investigate, but be prepared that we'll change that at some point of time. Okay, that was just a quick jump to Docker image and taking a look at system database. The main part of today's show is basically I want to show you how I upgrade existing application from Neo4j 3.5 to 4.0. Let me just go to presentation mode and you have a much larger font on your end. Where is that here? Presentation mode, here we go. Yeah, so I got here a very minimalistic Maven project that just has a POM, which has a dependency on Neo4j kernel and Neo4j harness for testing, and we use 3.5.14 here. And then instead of an application, I just have one test class. The test class uses the Neo4j rule. You probably know about Neo4j rule. It spins up a Neo4j instance in a unit test for you, which cares about ports and all that stuff yourself. And then I have a few test methods which all require some change for 4.0. So we run a cipher statement with a parameter. We have a method that deals with nested transactions. So we have here an outer transaction where we create a node 1, and inside that transaction we open another transaction. And in Neo4j 3, that will give us a placebo transaction, so de facto the same transaction. So we add another node and then we do success, and we expect that we get back 2 nodes at the end. And here I'm also spitting out the class names of the transaction class being used. And here you'll see that you get different class names being listed here. What I also want to show you, which caused me some headache in migrating APOC, you cannot share node relationship instances between transactions anymore. So if you have here transaction 1 that reads a node, and you store it here in a node variable, and in another transaction, you continue using that node instance that did work on 3.5, but it will not work on 4.0. I'll show when we upgrade the code, I'll show how we can deal with that. Then I have another test method that deals with the graph algo factory, because there's also something that has changed. We'll see that shortly. And then I have some code that uses the graph properties, which have gone away, and I'll show you how we can use the system database instead. Yeah, so when we want to update the version, the first thing I do is I go to the POM file and bump the version to 4.0. 4.0. By the way, the jar files for 4.0 should already be on Maven Central. And let's get into here. And here you see a lot of red already, so we need to fix that. There's a few packages that have been moved to different package names, like Neo4j rule. You see here, it used to be an org Neo4j harness JUnit, and now there has been another sub-package rule. Yeah. Then this rule, the Neo4j rule class doesn't have a get graph database service any longer, because the Neo4j rule represents the full database management system, which might have multiple databases. So instead of get graph database service, there's now default database service, which returns the default database. Then let's see what we do here. We want to here execute a cipher statement on a database with a parameter. Okay, first of all, there is this map util, which has also been relocated. So you see here from helpers collection has been removed to internal helpers collection, just to indicate it's not public API. Yeah, and db execute doesn't exist anymore, right? Why? So if there is a method now, just open the graph database interface. We can download the source later on. So there is on the graph database servers, there is a few overloaded methods called execute transactionally. So that under the hoods, if you call these methods, they will open a transaction, execute some cipher, and if you provide a result transformer, it will just return the result of this result transformer thing. Let's go back here. So what we want to do here, we need to provide here then a map of parameters. We have already that, and when we need the result transformer. Result transformer, I'm implementing that here as a kind of functional interface here. And we want to have back the name of the person. So we put here, let's say string name equals. And we know that there is only one result, so we can just use return iterators. Iterators has also been moved package single of result get column as, right, column as, and then the name of the column. Yeah, sorry, that was a little bit stupid for me. So I need to, I have two statements here. I have one that creates the node and the other one that checks. I was too quick here, sorry. So we don't investigate the result here. We just want to execute something. So we do just execute transactionally, and we ignore the result. We don't need it. It's a write only statement. The other one here, that needs to be refactored or rewritten. So we do here string name then equals db execute transactionally. Then we need to pass in the cipher statement. And that returns a column name here. So this one doesn't use parameters, so we can just supply an empty map. And then we have our result transformer. And the result transformer here in this case should just return a name. So we do here then return iterators single of result dot column as name, and that should do it. And of course we need an assertion. Assert equals, do we expect John here? John, common name. Okay, so that already helps us compiling the code. This will throw an error when we run the code. We will come to that once the code is runnable. So we got here also default database service. What we need to change here is create node is no longer possible on the database. It needs to run on the transaction. And here also create node needs to run on the transaction. We have an inner transaction here. And we don't need success. Instead, when we close a transaction, it's now commit. Commit. And here, same thing. We have here a cipher statement that returns the number of nodes. We can use the same logic as above, where we do db execute transactionally. Then we pass in cipher statement. We have an empty parameter set, and we have our result mapper being iterator single of result column as count, and another closing parenthesis, and that should do it. Yeah, and then for this is pretty much similar to it. So now we have here an execute transactionally instead. The find node has also been moved to the transaction interface. We do commit here. We do another commit here. So this was the case where I want to show that you cannot reuse the node person. So I'm expecting an exception in that method. Now let's do for the graph algo test. We also need the default database. Then we set some test nodes up. So here I'm just for shortest path. I go from city A to city B to city C with with 2 hops with a distance of 7 in sum. And there's also a direct link between A and C with a distance of 10. And I want to find the shortest path, which should be ABC here. So the first variant. So for using the algorithm for shortest path here, I need first a hook to the start and end node. And then you see here, we got here also an error. So syntax doesn't really fit yet because we have these algorithm functions from the Graph Algo Factory now require evaluation context. And there you do new basic evaluation context. And the evaluation context consists of the database, the current transaction, and it needs to have a handle to the database itself. And for the graph properties, I already mentioned that the graph properties do not exist any longer. So here we want to just set a property hello to Rally World, and another one where another transaction where we check if that has been set. So we do the same on the system database now, and therefore we can do graph database service system db equals Neo4j, and here we go to the database management service. That's a new interface, and this gives us access to all the databases. So we could either list all the databases, or we can ask a specific database. And this is just, and it's the name is a string, and I just use the appropriate constant. I think system database name, yeah. It's just the word system. And then I don't need this casting to low-level API things. And here I can just then go to system DB, and this is also the system DB here. And of course, I cannot store properties directly in the system database. I need to attach them to a node. So I need to have a node, tx create node. And on that node, I then can store properties, commit. And to find that node, of course, let's give that a label. So label, let's call this, just label something. And then we can do here tx find node, again with our label something. And we're looking for the key hello with a value of world. That gives us the node, and then we just do an assertion that the property matches. No, node. And then we close the transaction. Okay, so now let's just reorganize imports. And now we have the class is now clean, so we can now run that. And let's see what happens. A few things work already, a few things will not. Okay, so we have a few failures here. Let's look at one. It says here for our cipher parameter test, which was the first one, it says here query execution exception. The old parameter syntax param is no longer supported. We need to use the dollar notation. So here we have a parameter with the old notation, and for a long time we already have this new notation with dollar in here, and this is this puzzled me on a lot of statements in the APOC tests that all of them use the old notation. So I need to have a lot of changes there to make that work again. So that's just important for you to know. Always use the dollar notation when considering going for 4.0. Then the test for the graph properties already worked. Then we have this share instance, this thing here. So here it says not in transaction. The transaction has already been closed. That means basically we're loading a node here, person one in that transaction. And here we try to reuse that node instance, but it has been created in a different transaction. So therefore it cannot use that thing anymore. What we can do, however, is we need to rebind that node to the current transaction by saying here our person one equals transaction, and then we just reload the node by its internal ID, person one dot get ID, because the only thing I can do on that node instance outside the originating transaction is ask for its internal ID. And with that change, that test should go green. That's not super obvious. That's something probably you should really keep in mind when migrating existing projects for 4.0. And I think the other changes we have talked about. So let's just rerun the whole thing again. And of course, the code for that is on GitHub. I'll share that together with the slides after the webinar. Yeah, finally everything went green. What we see here, by the way, is that we get the same transaction implementation class being listed for that nested transaction method. So this really indicates that we deal here with two completely separated transactions. So they have nothing in common. They are not nested. They just exist side by side. And I think that's almost what I have prepared for today. I'm gonna take a look at the questions.
I don't think we have any questions yet. I haven't seen anybody post any questions yet while you were presenting, but we can give people a chance to ask, because sometimes it takes a second to type it up. I think there's a little raise hand. Okay, so yeah, there's questions coming in. So let's just give it a second.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. I think it's a half a question. I know your example is in Java. I think that's a half a question. It probably was like a shift enter kind of thing. Typing slowly. Okay, so we know we have questions. So if you guys want to start writing out your questions, we can ask Stefan while he's here. Thanks for doing this, Stefan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Your first Ninja presentation.
Wow, what an honor.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're like bringing content that's good. Okay, Michael is asking, or do you see the questions here that what Michael's asking?
Let me it's at the very end. Okay, how will this affect the other drivers? The Python driver and JavaScript. So what I've shown today is only for the Java bits, basically. So for the other drivers will not really be much affected by that. So you can, when you connect to a 4.0 instances, you can optionally provide the name of the database you want to communicate with, and then your statements are executed against that database. So this should be mostly transparent. And even if you're using an old Neo4j driver with a 4.0 instance, they will agree on the older protocol and always use the default instance. Does this answer the question, Michael?
Okay.
But Karen, what we potentially could do is ask Nigel to give, for one of the next Ninja presentations, an update on the driver's bits.
Yeah, if everyone is interested, so I've been sending out like the emails that I've been sending out to the ninjas. It has like polls to see what people are interested in seeing next. And I think we have drivers listed in there, or at least something about it. I don't know exactly what it is, but I could definitely include that in the topics. I'll talk to Nigel about it and see if he's interested. Okay, Brant said he likes the idea of a driver 4.0 talk. So yeah, I can include it in the next email to take a poll. Yes, please. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we have thumbs up, you guys can put thumbs up here. This is like an interactive session, so feel free to be like, say whatever you'd like to. Yeah, we got a bunch of thumbs up. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like a lot of people are in it. I think the next one that we have the February one already scheduled. And then we have, I'm working on scheduling the graph algorithms one. So let's see, in February we have, it's going to be Max DeMarzi is presenting in February. Let's see. And then, yeah, so like I've been asking, so if anybody has ideas, like for all the ninjas out there that are watching, if you guys have ideas for topics that you're interested in, we have a lot of thumbs up for the Drivers 4.0 talks. If you guys have ideas for topics that you want to see, and it could be anything, like really just throw something out there and I see if I can get it done for you guys. So like, we were talking about doing like AMAs with like our product team and engineering. We could do something like that. We could do tips and tricks. Like, ideas are helpful because the way that we shape a lot of these programs is based on the feedback that we're getting from people. So it definitely go, like the feedback that you guys give definitely is considered. Oh, Koji's got a question. We're waiting for you to type your question, Koji. It's late for Koji right now. I think it's like after midnight. It's already tomorrow.
You're really late in Japan, yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to schedule these where it like kind of works for everyone. I'm thinking about maybe we should do one in the later afternoon for one of the next ones, maybe the algos one or something. So that way it'll be early morning for people who are in areas like Japan, and then it'll be like later in the evening for people in Europe. Okay. So Brant asked if there's a rough release date for 4.0 GA.
Well, there is, of course, there is a release date. I think I'm not allowed to really talk about that But I would have a close eye on any updates you hear from Neo4j this week.
We're ninjas. They can be trusted. That's funny.
Okay, so well,
yeah, Brad.
so 4 OTA will happen this week, basically.
Okay, so it's coming very,
but
very.
Don't tell this anyone.
Hey, can I just ask a question? Just like a show of hands of people here. Is everybody here planning to come to Graph Connect? Yes, Brant. He said this week. Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah, there's a lot of people coming to Graph Connect. You guys are all going to get invites for the Ecosystem Summit, which is like our private community contributors event that's going to be happening the day after Graph Connect. So like the 19th is going to be our Graph Hack. Then we have like the training sessions, Graph Connect conference. And the very next day is when they have like these other extended sessions. Like we have it's like the executive summit, the partner summit, and we also have the ecosystem summit, which is like the private community thing. You guys will get an email about it that's going to ask like in terms of content or what you'd like to see. And I was also considering doing a small lightning talk CFP. So like if people want to do like a 10-minute presentation on something related to our community or the developer community or something along those lines, they can do that. Okay, so cool. Does anybody have any other questions while Stefan is here? Take full advantage of it. Okay. All right. People are happy with it, so that's good. Nice job. So I'll send you guys all an email with like for feedback, and it'll have the recording and the slides. So if you missed any part of it, you can always check it out. We'll probably post these videos a couple months later publicly to make it accessible, but initially all this stuff is going to be exclusive just to people who contribute. So thank you guys for all your help, and thank you, Stefan, for taking the time to go over all this.
It was a pleasure, and if you have any follow-up question, please reach out to me directly as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, guys. Okay.